Cedric Hollowell was 44 years old, and he had spent the better part of 2 decades believing that a man who keeps his word has already won the only argument that matters. Not loudly. Cedric was not a loud man. He was the kind of man who noticed when the kava in the break room was empty and made a fresh pot without announcing it. The kind of man who remembered his nephew's baseball schedule and showed up to the second game, not the first, because everyone shows up to the first. He had built that version of himself slowly, the way you build anything meant to last, with patience, with repetition, with the understanding that character is not what you say about yourself, but what other people discover about you when the pressure comes. The pressure came on a Thursday morning in late March, in a glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. His wife of 11 years, Loretta Hollowell, sat across from him with her attorney and a manila folder, and the particular expression of a woman who has rehearsed this moment many times and is relieved to finally be inside it. She had, 3 weeks earlier, received a certified letter from the estate of her late uncle, Cornelius Fitch, informing her that she was the sole beneficiary of his holdings. The letter listed real estate, investment accounts, and a private equity position in a regional freight company. The total value, once liquidated and transferred, came to approximately $38 million. Loretta had not told Cedric about the letter. What Loretta did not understand, could not have understood, because she had been too focused on what she was gaining to pay close attention to what was already in place, was that Cornelius Fitch had not built $38 million by being careless with paperwork, and 11 months before his death, in a private meeting at a law office on Providence Road, the old man had restructured everything with great precision and with great purpose, and had placed Cedric Hollowell's name on documents his niece had never read. If you have ever quietly held together something that someone else decided was theirs to destroy, stay with me. This one will feel familiar. Charlotte, North Carolina. A Thursday in late March. The kind of morning that looks like spring from a distance and feels like February the moment you step outside. The sky was pale and stubborn. The azaleas along the parking deck had been fooled by a warm week and were already trying to bloom, and they would pay for it by the weekend when the temperature dropped again. Cedric had driven himself to the meeting in his 2017 Silverado, the one with the cracked corner of the rear bumper he had been meaning to get fixed for 8 months. He had a podcast on low and a travel mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm somewhere around Brookshire Freeway. He had been up since 5:30 reviewing cost estimates for a school gymnasium renovation project in Concord that was running 14 days behind schedule, and he had already exchanged 11 emails with his site supervisor before 7 a.m. He pulled into the parking deck at 8:43, sat in the truck for a moment, finished the coffee, checked his watch, a simple steel Belova his father had given him when he made project manager, the crystal slightly scratched from years of honest use, and went inside. The conference room was on the 14th floor, clean, neutral, the kind of room designed to communicate that what happens in it is professional and not personal, which is a lie that certain rooms tell very convincingly. Loretta was already there. She had spent the morning, Cedric could tell, with great attention to how she looked. Hair freshly done, the charcoal blazer she wore when she wanted to project authority. Her posture was the particular uprightness of someone who has been told they are in the right and has decided to wear it like a uniform. Her attorney was a compact man named Gerald something, with a pocket square and the unhurried manner of someone who bills by the hour and is comfortable with silence. Cedric. She said his name the way you say the name of a closed chapter. He nodded. He sat. I want to keep this simple, she said, which is what people say when what they mean is, I want to move quickly past the part where you might have questions. She slid a document across the table, a financial separation proposal, her name at the top, his at the bottom, a line for his signature. Cedric looked at the document without touching it. When did Cornelius pass, he said. A small pause. 6 weeks ago. I'm sorry, he said, and he meant it. He had liked the old man, had eaten dinner at his house twice, listened to his stories about building the freight company from a single leased truck and a contract with a furniture manufacturer in Hickory, had watched him eat cornbread with the focused satisfaction of a man who knows the value of what he has made. Loretta's jaw tightened slightly. She had not expected condolences. She had expected signatures. I'll need some time with this, Cedric said, sliding the document back without signing. It's straightforward, Gerald something said. Most things that are straightforward don't require a 14-floor conference room, Cedric said pleasantly. He left without signing anything. In the elevator going down, he pressed the button for the lobby, watched the numbers descend, and felt the specific calibrated quiet of a man who has known for some time that a particular moment was coming and has spent that time preparing for it rather than dreading it. His watch ticked. The elevator doors opened. He walked to his truck, sat in the driver's seat, and called a woman named Patricia Ossie. Patricia Ossie ran an estate litigation practice out of a suite of offices on South Tryon Street. She was 51 years old, direct in the way that only people who have wasted time being indirect ever learn to be, and she had a habit of listening to a full situation before asking a single question, which Cedric had found, in 2 previous professional encounters, to be one of the rarest and most useful qualities a person could possess. She had helped him once with a contractor dispute on a public works project. That had been 4 years ago. He had never forgotten how she worked. He told her everything. Cornelius's death, the certified letter he had intercepted accidentally. It had come to their home address, and he had brought it upstairs to Loretta unopened, had noticed through the envelope window the estate attorney's letterhead, and had quietly noted the name of the firm. The conference room that morning, the document with the signature line. How much? Patricia asked. 38 million, he said. A pause, not surprise. Patricia Ossie did not appear to be a person who was easily surprised, more like the pause of someone organizing information into the right compartments. And Cornelius, she said, what was your relationship with him? Close, Cedric said. Closer than she knew. Tell me why. So he did. He went back 4 years. 4 years ago, Cedric Hollowell had a solid marriage, a good business, and a problem that had nothing to do with him directly, but landed on him the way problems have a way of landing on the people who are built to solve them. Cornelius Fitch's freight company. Fitch Regional Carriers, 32 years old, 11 trucks, contracts with 4 distribution centers across the Piedmont, was in serious distress. A bad series of decisions by a CFO Cornelius had trusted too long, a fuel hedging arrangement that had gone sideways, and a bank line of credit that was being called in. The company was not bankrupt yet, but it was close enough to smell it. Loretta had mentioned it at dinner one Sunday, not as a request, just as a worry. Uncle Cornelius is having a hard time. I don't know what he's going to do. Cedric had listened. Then he had asked, quietly, if the old man would sit down with him. He spent 3 Saturdays at Cornelius's kitchen table. The old man was proud in the way that men of his generation sometimes are, pride not as vanity but as a form of dignity, a refusal to be reduced. He did not ask for help, but he accepted it when it was offered without condescension, without performance, without a single sentence that began with what you should have done. Cedric restructured the debt personally. He put in capital from his own savings, $280,000, which represented most of what he had accumulated outside of the business over 15 years. He negotiated directly with the bank. He identified 2 dormant contracts Cornelius had let lapse and revived them with a single conversation and a handshake and a follow-up email the same afternoon. Within 14 months, Fitch Regional Carriers was not only solvent, but had added 2 trucks and a new distribution agreement with a home goods company in Gastonia. Cornelius had stood in his driveway on a Sunday afternoon after church, in his good suit, and shaken Cedric's hand with both of his. You didn't have to do that, he said. Yes, sir, Cedric said. I did. What Cedric had not known then, what he would not learn until Cornelius called him to a private meeting 11 months before his death, was how carefully the old man had been watching, not just the company, everything. He had watched the way Loretta's interest in the estate had shifted in recent years, from love to inventory. The way she asked about account balances rather than about his health, the way she had begun spending time with a man named Terrence from her professional network, a financial consultant with good shoes, and the particular fluency with other people's money that can look, from a distance, like competence but is, on closer examination, something else entirely. Cornelius had made his decision. He had restructured the entire estate into a private irrevocable trust 18 months before his death. Every asset, the properties, the equity stake in the freight company, the investment accounts, was placed inside the trust with a corresponding debt obligation built into its architecture. A mirror obligation, equal in value to the assets themselves. The trust had one beneficiary, it also had one creditor, and at the meeting on Providence Road, sitting across from an estate attorney named Harold Pemberton in a quiet office that smelled of old books and central heat, Cornelius had looked at Cedric for a long moment and said, "I want you to understand something before you respond." Cedric had sat. "The money I leave behind is not my legacy. This company is my legacy. The relationships I built. The men who drove my trucks for 20 years and have retirement accounts because I did right by them. That is my legacy. And I will not allow it to be handed over to people who see it as a windfall and a starting point for a life they did not earn." He paused. He was not a man who rushed his own sentences. "You are the sole beneficiary of the trust. You are also its primary creditor. Every dollar, every property, every contract, it all flows through you first. She will receive what the trust allows. She will not receive the authority to dismantle what I spent 30 years building." Cedric was quiet for a moment. "She's your niece," he said. "She is, and I love her. But love does not require me to be blind to what I see, and I have seen enough." Cornelius set his hand flat on the table. "When she makes her move, and she will make it, because I know my family, I want you to be ready. Not for revenge, for protection. There's a difference." Cedric held the old man's gaze. "Yes, sir," he said. "I hear you." He had driven home that evening and said nothing. Loretta had been in the living room watching something on television. He had made himself a sandwich in the kitchen, stood at the counter, and eaten it alone in the particular silence of a man who is carrying something new and has not yet decided exactly how it fits. He had called Patricia Osei 3 days later. They had spent the following 11 months building something invisible and airtight. A forensic accounting review of the trust structure and all connected assets. The careful acquisition of lien positions on 2 of the commercial properties through the trust. Documentation of the financial consultation arrangement Loretta had entered into with Terrence. Arrangements that, on review, had resulted in approximately $890,000 in trust-adjacent funds being redirected through advisory fee structures into accounts bearing Terrence's firm's name. Through all of it, Cedric came home on time. He cooked on Sundays. He drove his old truck. He attended Loretta's cousin's wedding in August and danced with her at the reception, and said nothing about the text message he had seen accidentally on her unlocked phone 2 months earlier. He attended her office Christmas party in December and smiled at Terrence across the appetizer table and shook the man's hand and said it was good to see him. Some nights, Loretta came home later than expected, and Cedric would be at the kitchen table with his project files, and when she'd pass through, he would say, "Long day?" and she would say something vague and go upstairs. And he would sit in the quiet with his coffee and his watch and his patience, which by that point had become something almost structural. Not endurance exactly, but the deep, load-bearing kind of stillness that certain men develop when they understand that timing is everything, and that acting too early destroys what acting wisely preserves. He had told his mother Renetta on a Sunday visit in February. Not the full plan. Enough. Renetta Hollowell was 67 years old, a retired school principal, and possessed the particular quality of certain women who have spent decades reading rooms full of children. The ability to understand exactly what is happening before anyone has finished a sentence. She had been watching Loretta for 2 years. "Baby," she said, not looking up from the sweet tea she was pouring. A woman who stops asking how your day went is already somewhere else in her mind. "I know, Mama." She set down the pitcher and looked at him directly. "You are doing the right thing. I want you to know that I know that." He nodded. "And Cornelius knew it too," she said. "That man saw exactly what was happening under his roof. He just loved her too much to say it while he was alive." Cedric thought about that for a long time on the drive back to Charlotte. The invitation arrived by text, which was itself a statement about the nature of the evening. The Hollowell Wealth Transition Celebration. Saturday, April 12th. The Carrington Room, Dunhill Hotel, Charlotte. 7 o'clock. Cocktail attire. Loretta Hollowell requests your presence. She had hired an event planner. She had booked the Carrington Room, which seated 180 and had original mahogany wainscoting and a chandelier that had been in the hotel since 1929. She had sent invitations to Charlotte's professional community. The people who had known Cornelius Fitch, who had done business with him, who had attended his church, and sat at his table. The people who mattered to her image of what her life was about to become. She called it a wealth transition celebration. She had not consulted Cedric about the venue, the guest list, or the name. She had charged the event deposit to a joint credit account that was, technically, still active. Her assistant called Cedric on the Thursday before the event. "Mrs. Hollowell would like you to attend Saturday evening. Final separation documents will be available for your review at 9 o'clock, not at an attorney's office. In a ballroom, in front of every person she wanted to see her step into her new life. She had designed a public exit for their marriage because she wanted the story told a certain way, and she wanted witnesses who would remember. When the assistant confirmed he would be there, Loretta had said, "Tell him I appreciate his professionalism." Saturday morning, Cedric drove to his mother's house in Gastonia. Renetta made eggs and toast and a pot of coffee strong enough to clear your sinuses, and they sat at the kitchen table, the same formica table where Cedric had done his high school homework in 1995. And she told him about her garden and the new assistant pastor and the disagreement at the library board meeting, and he listened to all of it with the genuine interest of a man who understands that ordinary life is what you are fighting to return to. "You nervous?" she asked eventually. "No, ma'am." She looked at him. "You sad?" He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said, "that's the more accurate word." She set her fork down. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "You loved that woman honestly," she said. "There is nothing small about that. Doesn't matter how it ends." "No, ma'am," he said, "it doesn't." He left at 6. At 7:45, a black Cadillac Escalade coordinated through the trust, quiet, clean, unhurried, pulled to the front entrance of the Dunhill Hotel on North Tryon Street. Cedric stepped out in a dark navy suit, no tie, the collar of his shirt open by one button in the way of a man who is dressed for significance, but not for performance. At his side was Patricia Osei, in a charcoal blazer, carrying a leather briefcase that would have fit everything he owned at 22, and was now 3 inches thick with notarized documentation, color-coded and cross-referenced, the product of 11 months of meticulous work. The Carrington Room was full and warm, candlelight on old mahogany, a string quartet in the corner, the kind of room that makes the people inside it feel that the occasion has been given the gravity it deserves. Cedric moved through it the way he moved through job sites, steady, observant, not announcing himself. He saw the recognition in people's eyes. Some of these people had known him for years. Some had worked with Cornelius. A few of the older men in the room, men who had built things with their hands before they built them on paper, watched him cross the floor with expressions that shifted from surprise to something more considered. Loretta saw him from across the room. She was standing near the bar with Terence at her side, no longer kept to the professional distance posture she had maintained in public. He had his hand at her back in the familiar way of a man who believes he has already won. She composed herself in the half-second between seeing Cedric and choosing her expression. She crossed toward him, champagne flute in hand. "You came," said lightly, "for the room's benefit." "You invited me," Cedric said. She gestured toward a table near the center of the room where a manila envelope sat between the flower arrangements. "The documents are right there. This can take 10 minutes. Before anything else," Cedric said, his voice carrying no further than the small circle around them, "I want to ask you something." She lifted her chin. "Do you understand what the Fitch estate actually is? What it's structured as?" The room, which had been humming politely around them, went to register quieter. Rooms do that when something real is approaching. She gave a small, composed laugh. "It's my inheritance, Cedric. My uncle left it to me." "He did," Cedric said, and he nodded at Patricia. Patricia did not rush. She set the briefcase on the nearest banquet table, opened it with the efficiency of someone who does not need theater because the content is theater enough, and began laying documents in a row across the white linen. Labeled, tabbed, notarized. She spoke without preamble. The Fitch estate, approximately $38 million in assets, was restructured 18 months ago into a private irrevocable trust. That trust was constructed with a corresponding debt obligation equal in value to the assets it contains. Every property, every account, every equity position is secured against that debt. She paused. Cedric Hollowell is the trust's sole beneficiary. He is also its primary and only creditor. He is the only person with the legal authority to call the debt. Without his authorization, no asset in this estate can be liquidated, transferred, or encumbered. The room went completely still. Someone near the windows set a glass down. Someone near the back drew a slow breath. Loretta's champagne flute was very still in her hand. That was how Cedric knew she was working hard to hold herself together. The stillness, not the shaking. She swallowed. "That can't be right." "Page 3, Patricia said, sliding a document forward, "is the trust certification. Recorded 18 months ago. Notarized by 2 independent estate attorneys and filed with the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds." She said a second stack beside it. "This is a separate matter." She placed a bound document on the table. Clean white cover. Over the previous 14 months, approximately $890,000 was moved from accounts associated with the Fitch Estate Trust prior to its formal lockdown through advisory fee structures into accounts registered to a financial consulting firm. She looked briefly toward Terence. "That firm is registered to Terence Beaumont." One of the older men near the back of the room said something low and involuntary. The string quartet had at some point stopped playing. Terence moved, not dramatically. He was not a dramatic man, or rather, he was a man whose drama was always quiet and calculated. He began a slow, casual repositioning toward the far edge of the room where a side corridor opened near the kitchen. He made it 6 steps before the 2 men Patricia had stationed there. She had stationed them there at 4 o'clock that afternoon, while Loretta was at the salon, filled the corridor entrance with their presence. "Mr. Beaumont," said the nearer one, in the tone of someone stating a fact, "please stay in the room." Terence stopped. He looked at Patricia. Patricia was watching him with the composed, unsurprised expression of someone who built that outcome into the plan and is now simply observing it execute. The room had broken open in the quiet way that rooms full of composed, professional people break open. Not shouting, but the cumulative sound of 200 people simultaneously updating their understanding of the evening. The low rush of voices, the clinking of glasses set down, the older guests, the ones who had eaten dinner at Cornelius Fitch's house, who had shaken his hand at church for 30 years, who had watched a quiet construction manager spend his savings and his Saturdays to save what the old man built. Those guests were not murmuring. They were watching Loretta and Terence with the particular heavy judgment of people who have witnessed a specific kind of betrayal and know exactly what to call it. Loretta said, "You set me up." Cedric's voice was quiet. "I prepared. Your uncle asked me to protect what he spent his life building. That's what I did." She was searching his face for cruelty, for triumph, for the particular satisfaction of a man who has won and wants to make sure the losing is felt at full volume. She did not find any of it. What she found was harder: sorrow. The uncomplicated, long-worn sorrow of a man who had been faithful to someone for 11 years, had watched her make choices that moved her further away from who she once was, and had arrived at this evening not with satisfaction, but with the quiet grief of a person who can see clearly the exact shape of what has been lost. Cedric reached into the breast pocket of his jacket. What he removed was not a legal document. It was a letter. Single page, folded in thirds, the paper worn soft at the creases from being carried for several months. The handwriting on the outside was large and deliberate, and slightly unsteady in the way of an older man's hand near the end, but careful, each letter considered, written across the outside in Cornelius's hand. "To be read when the time is right. You will know." Several of the older guests recognized the handwriting before a word was spoken aloud. Cornelius had sent letters. He was one of those men. Birthday letters. Letters to thank people for small kindnesses. Letters that arrived in envelopes with stamps, not links. A woman in the second row pressed her fingers against her lips. Cedric unfolded the letter. His hands were steady. He cleared his throat once. Acoustics, not emotion, and read. His voice was low and unhurried. In the silence of the Carrington room, it carried clearly. "Cedric, if you are reading this where I believe you will read it, then the thing I feared has happened, and I am sorry for that. I am sorry for you, and I am sorry for her, because I know her better than she knows herself, and I understand what she is throwing away even if she cannot see it yet." Nobody in the room moved. "I built Fitch Regional with my father's work ethic and 40 years of early mornings. I nearly lost it. You saved it. Not because the law required you to. Not because there was anything in it for you. You saved it because you are the kind of man who finishes what he starts and protects what he loves. I have watched you for 11 years. I know what that is worth." Cedric's jaw held. His voice held. "I could not leave a legacy I spent 40 years building to be converted into someone else's starting capital. I could not call that love and mean it. Real love sometimes means putting the thing you built in the hands of the person you trust most to carry it forward. That is what I am doing. That is what this is." He looked up briefly. At no one in particular. At the room. "If my niece is there, and I believe she is, I want her to understand something her father tried to tell her when she was young, and she was too certain of herself to hear it. The man who is quiet is not the man who is empty. He is almost always the man who is full. I hope she finds her way to understanding that. I believe she will. But the understanding has to come on the other side of this. Not before." He folded the letter once. "You were the right person for this. You always were. Take care of what we built, son. I am proud of you." He folded it again, returned it to his breast pocket. The room held its quiet for several full seconds. Then Loretta moved. Not in anger. The anger had collapsed somewhere during the reading. She came forward with her hands outstretched in a way that was neither a lunge nor a reach, but something in between. The movement of a person trying to hold on to a thing that is already completely gone, and her heel caught the edge of the carpet runner at the base of the platform, and she went down hard. One knee, both hands flat on the floor, the champagne flute tilting out of her grip and shattering somewhere to her left in a bright, clean sound. The sound of something fragile meeting, something that does not give. She was on her hands and knees in the center of the Carrington room, and the sound she made had nothing practiced in it. It was grief without performance, The kind that arrives when the last version of the story you have been constructing for yourself finally collapses and you understand, in a single unguarded moment, exactly what you exchanged and for what. A hotel staff member came forward, helped her up, she let them. She was past pretending. She looked at Cedric across the room, her composure in pieces, mascara tracked down one cheek. The evening she had spent weeks designing now an entirely different kind of story. She looked at him the way a person looks at someone they have grievously underestimated and are only now, too late, beginning to actually see. "You let me think it was mine," she said. "It will never be fully yours," Cedric said gently. "Not because I'm keeping it from you, because your uncle built it with 40 years of his life and he wanted it protected. I'm protecting it. The way I protected it 4 years ago when it was almost gone and nobody was paying attention." He held her gaze one last time, the honest, finished gaze of a man who has already made his peace. "I wish it had gone differently, Loretta." He said it simply, the way you say a true thing that doesn't need decoration. "I genuinely do." Then he nodded at Patricia, who was already on her phone, coordinating the next set of steps with the efficiency of someone who has anticipated every variable and accounted for all of them. The two men at the corridor walked Terence Beaumont out through the side exit. He did not make a scene. He was too smart for scenes. He was, however, pale in a way that had nothing to do with the lighting. Loretta was guided to a chair by a woman from the hotel staff who brought her water and said nothing, which was the correct response. Cedric stood in the center of the Carrington room as the chandelier burned on, indifferent and bright, and felt the specific, settled quiet of something finished. Not triumphant, not relieved exactly, just done. The legal proceedings that followed had the efficiency of a case where the documentation is complete and the opposing side has nothing credible to offer in rebuttal. Patricia filed the civil complaint the Monday morning following the party. 14 months of forensic work, organized into 17 exhibit folders, each one cross-referenced and notarized. Wire transfers, advisory agreements, fee structures that had been deliberately sized to fall below standard reporting thresholds. Patient work, methodical work. Not methodical enough. The court ordered Terence Beaumont and Loretta Hollowell jointly liable for the full $890,000, plus penalties, accrued interest, and legal fees, payable within 60 days or subject to criminal prosecution on misappropriation charges. Terence surrendered his investment advisor, registration, within 6 weeks of the judgment. The State Securities Board had received 2 other complaints about his fee practices, from clients who had been reluctant to come forward until the Charlotte case gave them a reason. His firm dissolved in the summer. He moved out of his Ballantine condo in August, to somewhere no one who had known him in Charlotte made any effort to track. Loretta paid her share of the judgment. It required selling things. The jewelry she had bought the month after Cornelius's funeral. The European vacation package she had booked on a credit account, still attached to joint assets. The designer furniture she had purchased for the apartment she had moved into in South Park. A clean building, well located, nothing wrong with it by any ordinary measure, which she had once, in a different version of herself, described to a friend as temporary. The divorce was finalized on a Wednesday afternoon in Patricia's conference room. Cedric signed the papers with a plain ballpoint pen, set it down, looked at Patricia across the table. "Thank you," he said. "You built the case," she said. "I filed it." He looked at the signed documents for a moment. "He was a good man, Cornelius. By all accounts," Patricia said. A small pause. "The kind that doesn't come through paperwork, comes through what people do when they think no one is watching." Cedric nodded. He picked up his watch from the table where he had set it. It had slipped from his wrist during the signing, and put it back on. The crystal was scratched. The mechanism was perfect. 2 weeks after the judgment, Loretta's attorney passed along a personal question through Patricia's office. Who was the woman in the photo? Someone had posted a picture from the evening of the Carrington Room event. A candid taken outside the hotel entrance, just before Cedric went in. He was standing on the steps, phone in hand, and through the passenger window of the Escalade behind him, visible and composed and reading something on her phone, was a woman with natural hair cut close and an expression of complete, unhurried calm. Her name was Dr. Vivienne Caldwell-Reid. She was 42 years old, a trauma surgeon at Atrium Health in Charlotte. She had a laugh that arrived without warning and left you glad for it, and the particular confidence of someone who has spent years making decisions in rooms where indecision costs something irreversible. She had met Cedric 5 years earlier at a fundraiser for the Levine Children's Hospital, where Fitch Regional Carriers had donated a logistics contract for supply deliveries, and Cedric had shown up personally to coordinate the handoff, because that was how he operated. She had been attending the event on behalf of the hospital's surgical department. They had talked for 20 minutes about loading dock logistics and about a 9-year-old patient of hers who wanted to be an engineer. She had walked away thinking, with the quiet certainty of someone who trusts her own instincts, that man is the real thing. She had held that observation carefully without urgency for 5 years. 8 months ago, Cedric had called her on a Tuesday evening while she was finishing her charting at the nurse's station. He said, "I don't know if you remember meeting me." She said, "I remember." They had been together since. Steadily, honestly, without theater. Two people who understood their own minds, spending mornings with good coffee and evenings with real conversation, building something at the pace that things meant to last are built. They were not yet engaged. But Cedric had spent a Tuesday afternoon with his mother looking at rings in a case at a jewelry store on South Boulevard, and Renetta had pointed at one without hesitation and said, "That one," in the tone of a woman who is certain and does not particularly need to discuss it. Patricia relayed Loretta's question to Cedric in a brief email. Cedric responded formally, through Patricia's office. "Dr. Vivienne Caldwell-Reid is someone I intend to spend my life with." No additional context was offered. None was required. Loretta read the email in her South Park apartment, on the couch from the furniture store that had delivered it on a Thursday in November. She read it twice. Then she stood at the window for a while, watching the parking lot below. She thought about something Cornelius had told her at Thanksgiving dinner when she was 19. She had been dismissive of a young man at the table, a friend of her cousin's, quiet and careful and not particularly impressive to look at, and had said something sharp about him after he left, and laughed about it. Cornelius had set down his fork. He had looked at her with the patient, grieving patience of an older man who knows something a younger one has not yet earned. "Baby girl," he had said quietly. "The ones who don't need the room to hear them are the ones who built the room." She had not understood it then. She understood it now. The morning light in Charlotte in May comes in early and generous, the kind of light that does not ask permission. It finds the east-facing windows first, and then spreads across the floors and the tables and whatever is left on the counter from the night before. Cedric was on the balcony of the house he now owned outright. The same house Loretta had told him on a Thursday in March that she considered closed, at 6:15 in a clean t-shirt and the worn cotton pants he had owned since his 30s. He had a cup of coffee made in the French press Vivienne had installed on the kitchen counter 4 months ago with the quiet decisiveness of a woman who has made a choice and sees no reason to be tentative about it. He held his father's Bulova in his other hand, turned it over once, checked the face, wound it slowly, the small familiar resistance of a well-made mechanism, the tick that followed steady and precise and indifferent to everything happening around it. He looked out at the city, the skyline he had, in the most direct sense, helped construct. 3 of the buildings visible from this balcony had foundation work or structural retrofitting that his company had managed. He had stood in their basements, in the cold and the mud, and worked through the problems before anyone else arrived on site. He thought about Cornelius, about what it costs a man to give everything he has to something that other people take for granted, about how the giving is enough even when the taking is not seen, how it is always enough. He said it quietly, to the morning and the skyline, and to no one in particular. "I kept my word, sir." The door behind him slid open. He heard her, the specific, unhurried sound of bare feet on composite decking, the slight catch of breath in the cool morning air, and then Vivienne's arms came around him from behind, her chin against his shoulder, her presence the particular warmth of someone who has decided where she belongs and is entirely at peace with that. They stood like that, the city below them beginning its day. "The kitchen faucet," she said after a moment. Her voice carried a trace of the particular amusement she reserved for things that did not actually bother her. "I know, and the guest bathroom light switch is still doing that flickering thing." "I know. And your mother has called me 4 separate times about the rehearsal dinner menu, and every single call has included the word peach cobbler, as though it's a fixed point in the universe that I might be considering moving." Cedric laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere below the ribs, the kind that had been arriving more frequently in recent months, and felt each time like something returning. "Tell her she can have the cobbler," he said. "She can have whatever she wants." Vivienne reached around him and held out a second cup of coffee. She had brought 2. She always brought 2 because she paid attention to the small things and had from the beginning. "Are you all right?" she asked. Not with worry. With the honest, direct inquiry of someone who wants a true answer and has the patience to wait for one. He considered it the way he considered everything, completely and without rushing. "Yes," he said. "I think I actually am." And it was the truth, not the constructed truth of a man who has decided to perform recovery. The actual, interior, quiet truth of a person who set something heavy down at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way, and walked away from it without looking back. Renetta arrived at noon. She brought a sweet potato pie, not the Thanksgiving version, but the smaller everyday version, the one she made when she wanted to communicate love without making a fuss about it, and wore the expression of a woman who has been proven right about everything important and has the grace not to say so directly. She set the pie on the counter, looked around the house, looked at her son, looked at Vivienne. "That bathroom light," she said, "is a simple fix. We're handling that this afternoon." "Yes, ma'am," Cedric said. Renetta looked at Vivienne with the long, level look of a woman taking an accurate measure. Then she nodded, once in the way that means, "You will do. You will more than do." "Come help me with this pie," she said to Vivienne. Vivienne smiled, the real one, the one that arrived fast and unguarded, and went to help. Cedric stood at the counter and watched them. 2 women at his kitchen counter on a Saturday morning, one of them his mother and one of them his future. Both of them completely at ease with each other in the way of people who have independently arrived at the same accurate conclusion about the same man. Later, after the pie and the bathroom light and a long, wandering conversation about nothing in particular that somehow covered 30 years of family history, Cedric stood again on the balcony, watch in hand, city below. He let himself think about Loretta, not with bitterness, not with triumph, not with the particular weight of a man who is still carrying something, with the honest, settled grief of someone who loved a person faithfully for a long time, and watched that person choose poorly until there was nothing left to choose, and who had arrived at the other side of that without hatred and without self-deception. He had not lost anything that was ever really his. He had learned something, and he had protected something that an old man had trusted him with, and he had done it the way Cornelius would have wanted, without cruelty, without spectacle, with precision and patience, and complete fidelity to the difference between justice and revenge. He wound the watch one final time, set it against his wrist, felt the clean, steady tick of a mechanism that keeps perfect time regardless of everything happening around it. Then he went inside to his family, where the cobbler debate had resumed, and Renetta was winning it, as she generally won most things that she cared enough about to pursue. 3 things worth carrying away from this story. First, the documents that govern the things you love, wills, trusts, estate plans, deserve your undivided attention before they become relevant under pressure. Cornelius Fitch spent 40 years building something real, and he protected it by understanding his paperwork better than the people who expected to benefit from it. If you have family assets, sit down this month with an independent estate attorney you have chosen yourself. Not the family lawyer. Yours. Read what it says, ask what the words mean, then read it again. Second, the people in your life who show up without being asked, who fix the thing before you knew it needed fixing, who stay when leaving would be easier and no one would blame them. Those people deserve to be told, while you still can, that you see them. Cornelius waited until 11 months before his death to tell Cedric what he was worth to him. He told him eventually, and that mattered. But don't wait. Don't make someone carry 11 years of invisible service wondering if any of it registered. Third, greed announces itself quietly. It starts with small redirections, reasonable explanations, plausible deniability. By the time it becomes visible to the room, the damage is largely done. Trust your early observations. Cornelius trusted his and acted on them. That is the only reason the story ended the way it did. Everything else, the patience, the preparation, the particular dignity of a man who never raised his voice and never needed to, is its own lesson, and it does not fit into a numbered list. You will recognize it in the people around you if you look for it. They are usually the ones who are very, very quiet.